Good afternoon and welcome to the joint general session of the ISO Board of Governors and WEIM governing body. Please note that all audience microphones are muted until the public comment portion of the call. We will give you instructions on how to enter the queue at that time. With that, I'll turn the call over to Roger Collinton with the California ISO. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Silas. Welcome everybody to the joint general session of the ISO Board of Governors and the WEIM governing body. Let me start out by calling roll call for both bodies. I will note that Member Decker from the governing body is not present today. Governor Borenstein.
Present.
Member Campbell.
Here.
Member Governor Golitova.
Present.
Vice Chair Gardner.
Present.
Chair Konzioka.
Present.
Chair Leslie.
Present.
Member Prescott.
Here.
And Governor Shorey.
Here.
Thank you, ISO board members and governing body members. We do have a quorum of each body and we may move forward. With that, we'll go to the first item of the agenda, which is we'll start with welcoming comments from our chairs, and then we'll move on to public comment. Let me turn it to you, Chair Konzioka, for the governing body.
Thank you, Roger. Good afternoon. On behalf of the Western Energy Imbalance Market Governing Body, welcome to today's joint meeting. Thank you for your attendance. Your interest in the matters before us today are appreciated. And just so everyone is reminded that public comments are always welcome. And with that, I will now turn it over to Board of Governor Chair Mary Leslie for her remarks.
Thank you. And I just want to echo what you just said, that we welcome everyone to this meeting. And we want to especially thank the ISO staff for their preparation for these meetings, which I think is really extraordinary, the time and patience they have with all the stakeholders and also board members. So we want to thank the staff on behalf of all of us. And we want to look forward to a very efficient and effective use of our time today. And we seem to be blessed with a fairly short agenda. So with that, Roger.
Yes, thank you, Chair Leslie, Chair Konzioka. Silas, if we can check and see if there's any public comment at this time. This is the time for people to make public comments for items not specifically on the agenda. So if you have public comment other than things of our agendized items, do so now.
If you would like to make a public comment, please press the raise hand icon located at the bottom center of your Zoom screen. If you are dialed into our phone-only line, you can press #2 on your telephone keypad to enter the comment queue. There seem to be no comments in the queue at this time.
Thank you. Agenda item number 2 is our decision on our February, make sure I have the date right here, the February 1st, 2023 joint meeting. And if I may have a motion to approve the minutes from the joint general session for February 1st, 2023.
So moved.
And second?
I'll second Angelina.
Thank you. And let me go ahead and take the vote. Governor Borenstein?
God, I'm not used to going first with Ashkan. Aye.
Right. We were going to have to get a new board member with an A for a last name.
Clearly.
Member Campbell?
Yes.
Governor Golitova?
Aye.
Vice Chair Gardner?
Aye.
Chair Konzioka?
Aye.
Chair Leslie?
Aye.
Member Prescott?
Aye.
And I think it should say Vice Chair Shorey.
Yes.
Excellent, thank you. The motion passes. And agenda item number 3 for our CEO report, our Chief Operating Officer Mark Rothleader is filling in for Elliot. Mark?
Great, thank you, Roger, and Board Chair Leslie, Governing Body Chair Kanzioka, Board members, WEIM Governing Body members. Elliot was not available to join us today, so I did provide the CEO report on behalf of Elliot to the WEIM Governing Body yesterday, and I will do similarly to the Board of Governors tomorrow in general session. So with that, I will not repeat those reports today. However, on the agenda next, I am prepared to bring for joint decision today a recommendation to reappoint Dr. Scott Harvey to the ISO Market Surveillance Committee. So if you're okay, I will proceed to the next item and brief you on that. Okay, so Dr. Scott Harvey has served as a member of the ISO Market Surveillance Committee since 2011. His current term expires on March 31st, 2023 this year. During his tenure on the Market Surveillance Committee, Dr. Harvey has provided invaluable expertise and advice to the ISO Board of Governors, Western Energy Imbalance Market Governing Body, ISO management, and staff on numerous issues relating to the operation of the ISO market. Under the tariff and the new joint authority construct, the ISO CEO recommends joint approval by the ISO Board of Governors and the WEIM governing body for MSC appointments. Therefore, as outlined in the joint ISO Board of Governor and WEIM governing body memo, Elliot Mainzer requests that the ISO Board of Governors and the WEIM governing body approves the reappointment of Dr. Harvey as member of the MSC and authorize execution of a contract for a 3-year term. That concludes my briefing both on the CEO report and this decisional item, and I will take any questions at this point.
Any questions?
Yeah, I
Mark?
have a question. Oh, I'm sorry, Andy, you go ahead.
Andy, yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Mark, for the presentation. I appreciate that this is up for a joint approval. I did want to just recognize that I was through some of the prior adopted changes to governance that this the approval of new or reappointment of members of the MSC became a joint approval item. I just wanted to emphasize that, and the memo itself focuses on the tariff authority that the board has for approving appointments. But in addition to what's described in the memo, there is also, I just wanted to make clear, there's also sort of the authority that was approved via the governance changes that's reflected in the EIM governing body charter.
Agreed. Thank you.
Any other questions from the board of the governing body for Mark?
Yeah, I'm going to support this. I think Scott is great, but it did raise the issue for me of the MSC's turnover. And have we thought through what the right term of these positions is? And I mean, in some sense, maybe there shouldn't be any, as long as people are doing a great job. They should continue just as CAISO employees do. Is that the intent, or is there a larger view on this?
Well, we have had turnover at time, and I think both turnover where members didn't want to re-up for it, but also where we felt like there needed to be new members brought in. So I think Dr. Scott Harvey himself has been a long-standing member and a very valued member. Yep. In this case, and so we didn't feel like it was necessary for reconsideration of a new member because of his value and his track record.
Okay, thanks.
And I apologize because I'm not seeing hands raised or not. So I don't know if anyone else has a hand up, and it does. Oh, I found it, and I don't think there is. So with that, if Silas, if we can go to the online and see if we have any public comment on this item.
As a reminder to attendees, if you'd like to make a public comment, you can press the raise hand icon on Zoom or #2 on the phone only lines. There are no comments in the queue at this time.
Thank you. I think we can, sure I'm not, is there anything here? Sorry. We can go to the motion. Move that the ISO Board of Governors and the WEIM governing body reappoint Dr. Scott Harvey to the ISO Market Surveillance Committee for a 3-year term to end March 31, 2026. And move that the Chief Executive Officer is authorized and directed to enter into an appropriate consulting agreement with Dr. Scott Harvey to compensate him for his participation on the ISO Market Surveillance Committee. Can I have a motion, please?
Moved. Severin.
Thank you, Governor Borenstein. And a second?
Second, John.
Thank you, John. Governor Borenstein, once again, you're first, your vote.
Aye.
Member Campbell,
Aye.
Governor Galitova, Angelina.
Sorry, I was on mute. Yes.
I understand it's the
You,
modern
you
world.
could have
Vice
seen
Chair
my
Gardner,
lips
your
move.
vote, please. Right? It was either I or Y. I wasn't sure. My lip reading is not up to snuff.
Hey.
Vice Chair Gardner, your vote, please.
Aye.
Chair Konzioka,
Aye.
Chair Leslie,
Aye.
Member Prescott,
Aye.
and Vice Chair Shorey.
Aye.
Thank you, governors and governing body members. The motion passes. Our
Thank you.
next item is agenda item number 5, our decision on market parameter change enhancement. And for that, I will turn to Anna McKenna to introduce the item.
Thank you, Roger, and good afternoon, Board of Governors and governing body members, members of the public, and colleagues. We will be presenting to you today two items, actually. One will be presented under the Board of Governors discretion and class governance. The other item will be under joint, and Guillermo will walk you through both items. These are changes we're looking to make to one specific market parameter that affects the ISO balancing authority area specifically. And then the other under joint is a improvement to the process and how we handle scheduling parameters. I'd like to, before Guillermo gets started, note that on slide 10, we had a slight error, and Guillermo will indicate what that error is. We'll correct it. It's with regards to the header and the motion. We messed up a little bit in the title. Guillermo will note the correction, and we will post the corrected version of the document afterwards. Just wanted to make sure you were all aware with that.
And thank you, Anna. Let me just jump in for a second here, just so it's clear as we move forward. Once we go through the process for today's presentation, we'll get to motions, and this is kind of broken out into a couple of segments. We have the governing body presented an advisory opinion yesterday at its general session with regard to the shift factor threshold, and the board will separately vote on that, and then we will have a joint motion for the board and the governing body for the remainder of the changes to the market scheduling parameters, and so what we'll see is those two motions once we get to that point. So just so that we're clear and everyone kind of understands the direction we're going.
Yes, thank you, Roger. And with that, I'll ask Guillermo to get started on the presentation.
Thank you, Anna, for the introduction. Can you confirm you can hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Good afternoon, members of the Board of Governors and members of the Western Energy Imbalance Market Governing Body. I'm here to present the proposal for the market parameter change enhancement. This is a limited effort that was initiated to address two specific areas identified through the ISO standard market performance analysis. Next slide, please. This proposal addresses two specific items in the area of market parameters. The first proposal is to change a threshold for calculated values in the market that we know as shift factors. The reduced threshold will apply only to specific aggregated locations in the CAISO balancing area. The second proposed change is the implementation of a process that allows the ISO to make market parameter changes that are used to enforce priorities of schedules and constraints in the market clearing process. Although these two items are independent and severable, for efficiency in the process, these two items were stakeholdered together in one policy initiative. Next slide, please. For the first part of the proposal, this is about the threshold currently used for the shift factors. The reduced threshold will apply only to specific aggregated locations in the balancing area of the CAISO. And given the technicality of this item, let me start first with some background. A key feature of the ISO market is the use of locational marginal prices. The markets determine the optimal schedules and prices in a way that it considers all the transmission limitations. This is what we call congestion management, and it simply means that the resource dispatches that we clear in the market have to be feasible to flow throughout the transmission system. The market calculates a set of parameters known as shift factors. These factors measure the contribution of a resource at a given location to the power flows of a given transmission element. For example, if a resource has a dispatch of 200 megawatts and its factor is 10%, it means 20 megawatts of that generation will flow on the transmission line. The shift factors measure the effectiveness of resources to manage congestion in the transmission system, and their values depend on both the location of the resource, but also on the transmission system conditions. The factors will also be used to calculate prices. More specifically, it will determine the value of the marginal congestion component that is one of the components of our prices. Currently, the market applies a threshold of 2% to these shift factors to all locations, including locations with individual or aggregated resources. This was implemented since the beginning of the ISO nodal market back in 2009. Resources with a factor of less than 2% are not considered because these resources may not be effective to manage the congestion in the system and could result in very unreasonable redispatch of resources for little gain of the congestion management. This is not a prudent or consistent good utility practice. There is also the concern that by adding more and more factors, there will be a computational burden that could impact the market application that clears the market on a consistent basis. Next slide, please. We have regular performance assessment that we do across our markets, and the ISO identified an inefficiency in the application of the threshold for specifically aggregated locations. This can be illustrated in this illustration that we have in the slide. There are two resources. First, consider, for instance, that we have an aggregated location, like a typical default load aggregation point. That is the representation of our demand in the system. And let's consider that it has, let's say, 20,000 megawatts of demand. And assume the shift factor is 1.8%, which is below the threshold that we currently have in place of 2%. The contribution of this aggregated location will be 1.8% of 20,000 megawatts. That amounts to 360 megawatts. for any given transmission constraint, 360 megawatts is quite a significant contribution on the flow that is currently not considered because of the application of that threshold. In some cases, like in this illustration, the transmission limit of a relatively small constraint, like in the illustration of 250 megawatts, that contribution alone can be fully used the transmission capacity of that element, or in some cases could actually reverse the direction of the flow. Now, for comparison, consider the second resource. This is a typical individual resource, a generating plant, let's say the typical dispatch of 500 megawatts. Using the same factor of 1.8%, this represents a flow contribution of just 9 megawatts. This 9 megawatts relative to 360 megawatts of the aggregated location is much less material when we are dealing with congestion management, even though both have the same factor and are subject to the same threshold. The key conclusion here is that in addition to the shift factor value, the size of the resource matters and matters a lot for the congestion management of the system. Next slide, please. During the performance analysis that we do for any new policy that we implemented, specifically for the policy of the new settlements for congestion revenue rights, that is another product that we have in the CAISO market, the ISO observed an inefficiency in the settlements of congestion revenue rights. And that was created by the application of the 2% threshold on aggregated locations. As shown in the previous illustration, with the current application of the 2% threshold to all locations, the flow contributions from large aggregated locations are just too large to disregard for the congestion management and for price formation. Now, with the implementation of this new policy for settling congestion revenue rights back in 2019, the logic relies on the utilization of these same shift factors. Therefore, the issue that we see in the lack of accounting of these flow contributions in the energy market now transpire into the settlements of congestion revenue rights. And that is the issue that we identify and that we are trying to address with this proposal. Next slide, please. In order to address the issue, the ISO proposes to reduce the current threshold only for specific aggregated locations. Specifically, the ISO proposes to reduce the threshold from 2% to 0.2% for the default load aggregation points and trading hubs. We are pursuing this change through a formal process because the threshold of 2% is currently defined in the CAISO tariff. The existing 2% threshold would continue to apply to any other location. The reason for not pursuing a change to the threshold across all locations is because we still have the relevant concerns about inefficient dispatch for resources that have very little contribution to the congestion management, and also the computational burden imposed by considering many more records in the market application. The proposed change targets the flow contributions only on these aggregated locations for the CAISO balancing area. There is no change to the way how we do congestion management. There is no change in how we do price formation. This will continue to be in the same way it's currently done for all locations, even for those that have a threshold above the 2%. This will ensure that we remain with a logic that maintains the consistency between dispatches and prices. Because the driver for this proposed change is from the impact of congestion revenue rights, which is only a construct for the ISO balancing area, management is proposing to apply this change only to the ISO default load aggregation points and trading hubs. This will not apply to the Western Energy Imbalance market load aggregation points or default generation aggregation points. Lastly, because there are some intertie locations also that have a significant size, for instance, Malin or Palo Verde, The same implications can result when dealing with these intertile locations. The ISO has committed to consider to apply the lower threshold to intertile locations based on future assessment of the impacts of those intertiles in the congestion revenue rate settlements. Once we complete that assessment, the ISO would have the authority to use that lower threshold to a specific intertile that we identified through the analysis. Next slide, please. With this, let me move on to the second part of the proposal. The second part of this initiative proposes to implement to be able to expedite changes to the values of some market parameters. As a background, let me start by indicating the market uses a set of configurable parameters to enforce the relative scheduling priorities and constraints in the market. These parameters are known as scheduling parameters. The values of these parameters are defined based on studies and analysis that we do every time we have to implement a new logic in the market. And the idea is that we define the values to ensure that we respect and honor all the priorities through the different market scenarios. The market uses dozens of these parameters, and the calibration and synchronization of all this together is an effort that we take every time we implement a new feature in the market. And we continually assess how they are performing given the different combinations of conditions and factors that play in the market. However, given the large number of possible conditions, different dynamics in the market, it may happen that at some point in the market, from time to time, there may be some conflict given all these combination of parameters, such that the scaling parameter value that we have currently utilized may not lead to the intended market solution. When these type of cases arise, the ISO would want to adjust the values of these parameters, leading to the unintended market solution. However, the limitation is that these specific values of certain key scheduling parameters are defined in the tariff. Therefore, the ISO doesn't have the flexibility to be able to just adjust the scheduling parameters as needed. A tariff change may be required, and that may take a long process to be able to effectuate and put in place. And in the meantime, there may be an inefficiency being produced in the market solutions. This is really the main driver for why we are asking to have a way to be able to expeditiously apply changes when the ISO identifies a market issue. Next slide, please. Given that concern, the ISO proposes to adopt a procedure that enables the ISO to make expedited changes to the values of specific scheduling parameters. The proposed procedure authority will allow the ISO to modify the scheduling parameters on a temporary basis when it's needed and that we have identified a specific issue, such that we have to align the values to achieve the intended priorities and avoid further implications of the market solution and potential reliability conditions. The ISO will have the authority to temporarily change the scheduling parameters for a period of up to 90 days, which we will follow immediately by filing at FERC for making that change permanent, and that would be within a window of 30 days. We have committed that the ISO will consult with the Department of Market Monitoring and as well as with FERC as soon as it's reasonable to be able to apply the temporary modification. We also committed that the ISO will notify market participants of this change within 1 business days after we have implemented the change. There is a very key factor to consider for this proposal, and that is that this process will not allow the ISO to change the defined scheduling priorities of different schedules. The proposal is simply to adjust the values, but still preserving and maintaining the expected priorities. Next slide, please. Moving on to stakeholder positions. Overall, stakeholders support the proposal. During the stakeholder process, the ISO addressed a series of comments, and we have adjusted certain aspects of the proposal accordingly to address these comments. One request was to expand the application of the reduced shift factors to intertile locations, and another suggestion was to apply it to all locations. We do see merit to consider the application of this reduced threshold to some specific intertiles because, as I indicated earlier, they are quite large. And we're seeking authority to be able to do this after we have completed the assessment specifically for the intertiles. However, the ISO is considering to run this reduction of the threshold to all locations because we still have the relevant concerns of the ineffective dispatch of resources when they have very small contributions to the power flows. In a different comment, one stakeholder expressed concerns with both reducing the threshold for only aggregated locations and the impact on prices. The ISO has explained that the change of the threshold will be more accurate in the price formation and in the flow contributions of these locations. The ISO has also expanded the analysis of the proposal and provided more analysis and insights, specific cases of how the pricing would look like under the change. And the conclusion is that this change will indeed impact the prices, specifically the price of the congestion, but it will be reflecting more accurately the contribution of these aggregated locations and is going to remain consistent across the markets. In the second part, regarding the concern about the differentiated treatment for aggregated locations, the proposal is based on the fundamental difference of the size of the locations. As I illustrated, aggregated locations are quite large in comparison to individual locations, and that difference in size leads to quite different contribution in the flows. Furthermore, any participant bidding at any of these aggregated locations will be treated in the same way during the market clearing process. In the last comment, there was one WEIM participant that supported the proposal, but wanted to further understand the logic for the decisional classification of the advisory role for the first part of the proposal. And currently, this change arises from an enhancement specific to the day-ahead market, which currently applies to the CAISO balancing area. Given the timing of this initiative, there is indeed a possibility that this or any other initiative may have some pricing implications for any future extended day-ahead market participation. Although the change of the shift factor threshold wouldn't apply nowadays to the Western energy imbalance market or to the extended day-ahead market in the future, it will establish a methodology that could logically be expanded to the extended day-ahead market. Therefore, to ensure the proper stakeholder and review of this specific policy and any other subsequent policy that may impact the extended day-ahead market, the ISO committed to have a subsequent stakeholder process to review this policy in connection to the application of the extended day-ahead market. These are the two parts of the proposal. If we can move to the next slide, please. As explained earlier by Anna, there is some language that is not accurate in this slide regarding the motion for the first component of the proposal. For the first component of the proposal, the ISO is requesting the Board of Governors the approval to apply the 0.2% shift factor threshold to the ISO-only aggregated locations. This proposal will improve the market efficiency because it will provide more accurate estimation of the flow contributions from these aggregated locations, as well as more accurate price formation. This will also result in more accurate settlements of the congestion revenue rights. Can we move to the next slide, please? For the second part, the ISO recommends the ISO Board of Governors and the Western Market Governing Body to approve the proposal to implement a process to be able to expeditiously make changes to the scheduling parameters when there is a production issue in the system. This change will improve market efficiency because it will enable the ISO to address expeditiously market issues arising from the implementation of the scheduling priorities. That's all what I have for this proposal. I will be happy to take on any follow-ups or questions you may have.
Thank you, Guillermo. Any questions from the governing body or the board for Guillermo?
Roger, I have a question.
Go ahead, Mary.
Guillermo, I thank you for this presentation. This is really helpful. And it seems like an extremely good proposal to improve efficiency and payment schedules. But let me ask you a question. The notification on the 1 day, how did you determine it 1 day? If you perceive a real jam, right, a real problem, a real congestion, right? What if it needs to really, does it need to be more timely than even 1 day? I'm just curious. And how did you decide on 1 day notification?
Yeah. Yes, and thank you for the question. I think there are two components to balance here. One is first, how quickly we can identify the issue and come to the conclusion that we make a determination for a change in a specific value. That naturally takes some time, and depending on the severity of the issue, depending on the complexity of the issue, it may take a certain time to realize what the change needs to be done. Now, we have to consider that this may happen at any time. It may happen at any time of the day. It may happen at any day of the week. Sometimes it may happen on the weekend or on holidays. So in order to ensure that we can certainly provide that update to the market, we are saying that within 1 business day, we should be able to provide that notification, because by the time we are making the change, immediately we can proceed forward with issuing the market notice. So 1 day is the minimum time we have to be able to notify the market through the market notice that we have in place. And if it is a long weekend, for instance, that something may happen, we need to ensure that we have all the items in place that allow us to release the market notice. In some cases, we have people on call that could be available to help us to expedite the change. But 1 business day we find to be a reasonable trade-off between giving us the time to go through the process change and also timely notification for participants to realize that something is changing effectively from the day before.
Member Campbell, you have a question?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Guillermo, for the presentation. And I just wanted to, just for the sake of clarity, make sure I understand that on the parameter change process, that the process, in terms of the boundaries of that process, the process is to be used to implement existing policy around scheduling priorities, and it's not a process to change the scheduling priority policy.
That's correct, Member Campbell. There was a lot of interest from the community that this process wouldn't be a backdoor to change the defined priorities that we currently have implemented through different policy initiatives. There is a spirit behind the different policies that we have implemented in recent years that defines what should the intended scheduling priorities be. We want to honor these scheduling priorities. We're not expecting to change those. This change, if it ever happens, is going to be precisely for the sake of ensuring that intended priority is in place. Because in some cases, what we have seen in the past is that by using specific values, that priority may be misaligned, and the fix for that is to bring it as intended to be per the policy previously defined. You are correct. We are not intending to change in any way or fashion the intended and already defined priorities in the market.
Thank you.
Don't see any further questions at this point, but there will be another opportunity if one arises. Next, we have up the Department of Market Monitoring, Ryan Kralinski.
let's see. Let's see. This is Ryan. Did you want me to go first, or did you want the governing body to give their advisory opinion first?
Yeah, I actually was shifting things a little bit. I thought it made more sense. Excuse me. I thought it made more sense, and I was going to let you go first, and then have the governing body advisory opinion.
Thank you. All right, so good afternoon, Chair Leslie, Chair Konzielka, governors and governing body members. This is Ryan Korinsky from the Department of Market Monitoring, and I'll be summarizing DMM's views on the market parameter enhancements. DMM supports both elements of the proposal. The first element is the shift factor threshold for large nodes. When considering which injections and withdrawals to move up or down to manage congestion on a constraint, the market software ignores nodes that fall below that shift factor threshold. So reducing that threshold for nodes that have large quantities of supply or demand, that makes more options available for the optimization able to anchor to manage congestion on some constraints. So this can help the software find a lower cost solution. Ideally, the ISO would lower that the threshold for all nodes at the same time, but we understand the ISO's reasons for why they could create some practical concerns. And so we support the proposal to lower the threshold only for major nodes at this time. But on this issue of lowering the threshold for some nodes, but not all, we note that the shift factor thresholds that currently exist today already create some modeling differences between nodes and between markets. And DMM monitors for issues that these modeling differences can create. And we'll continue monitoring for potential unintended consequences of the proposed changes. And we appreciate that the ISO will be monitoring this as well. Next, let's see, the ISO proposes to have the authority to temporarily change scheduling run parameters without a FERC tariff filing. The numerical values of the scheduling run parameters that are specified in the tariff, those numerical values define the order that the different schedules are prioritized. It's this order of the priority between schedules that matters from a policy perspective. And the ISO is proposing to be able to temporarily change the numerical size of the parameters, but not the order of the prioritization. And being able to quickly adjust the scale of the parameters, it should help the ISO to actually better implement the intended priority between schedules. And that's because it tends to only be in kind of stressed conditions that the ISO can see that the existing size difference between parameters may not be resulting in the optimization getting the intended priority right. So DMM supports the proposal. Thank you for your time, and I'd be happy to try to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ryan. Any questions for Ryan? Mary, please go ahead.
Yeah, just to be consistent, Ryan, the timing of the one-day notification, a 24-hour period. If you know you have a big problem early one day, and then it takes you 24 hours to make an adjustment, we've seen historically that can be an expensive proposition. So I'm curious, is a one-day notification a tariff requirement, or is a one-day notification the reality of being able to do it? Make the adjustment and notify people. And would it take care of any kind of market manipulation if there was? That's my question.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the one day, DMM is not going to be involved in any notification, right? So I think our role in this is going to be helping the ISO maybe be another set of brains in determining whether or not the change to the parameter sizes may actually result in changing the order of the priority, the scheduling priorities. So I think defer to the ISO and Guillermo's response in terms of what they think they can do from a business process perspective. And one day sounds reasonable.
Yeah, and if I could add more on this, thank you, Ryan. Let me clarify that the one day is after we have implemented the change. It's not a time window from where we identify the issue, make the change, and make the notification. The one day is only regarding the timing that is going to take us to notify the market that the change has been implemented. It's only the notification time window. Originally, I have to say that we were 3 business days to ensure that we have enough time to do all the homework on our end and then notify the market at whole that we have made the change. And we consider the feedback from participants, and they wanted to have a more timely notification of any changes that is impacting the scaling priorities, and therefore we reduced from 3 days to 1 day. That is the shortest window we can have to make the notification once we have implemented the change. And that is different. Yeah.
Guillermo, just to clarify, you're going to make the change immediately if you see a problem. It's the notification that could take 24 hours.
Correct.
Awesome. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Guillermo, this is Rob, just on that, I thought it was 1 business day, correct? So it wouldn't necessarily be 24 hours.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. Let me note at this point that, so yesterday at its general session meeting, the WEIM governing body approved the motion that it will provide verbal advisory input to the ISO Board of Governors as supporting management's position on the shift factor threshold element of the market parameter changes enhancement proposal. And so that was the motion that was approved, and I will turn to the chair of the governing body, Chair Konzioka, if you have any more to add to that, or anyone else from the governing body. But let's start with you, Chair Konzioka.
Roger, that was a great summary of what I was going to say. And so we had a presentation by Guillermo. After a discussion, we did vote 4-0 in approving, and no concerns were expressed. So if we need to go beyond that, I can let any of the other governing body members provide any detail. We did have some detail on the issues expressed by some of the participants, and we believe that they were all addressed.
Excellent. Thank you, Chair Konzioka. I don't see any other hands raised, but I'll just pause for a moment. And as I do, Silas, if there is any public comment, could you check on that? If there's any public comment for this initiative?
If you would like to make a public comment, you can press the raise hand icon on Zoom or #2 on our phone line. There are no comments in the queue at this time.
Thank you. I will once again, I'll give a last chance to the governing body and the board if you have any additional comments. Otherwise, I think we're ready for our 2 motions, but governing body, board. Seeing none. First, we will start with the Board of Governors only motion. Move that the ISO Board of Governors approve the changes to the application of the shift factor threshold as described in the memorandum dated March 14, 2023, and move that the ISO Board of Governors authorizes management to make all necessary and appropriate filings with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission to implement the shift factor threshold change proposed in this memorandum, including any filings that implement the overarching initiative policy, but contain discrete revisions to incorporate commission guidance in any initial ruling on the proposed tariff amendment. Board of Governors, may I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Jan, or second, either way.
Okay, Jan is second. Angelina was first. Governor Bornstein, your vote, please.
Aye.
Governor Galitova.
Aye.
Chair Leslie.
Aye.
And Vice Chair Shorey.
Aye.
Thank you, governors. The motion passes. Next, we have a joint motion for both the Board of Governors and the WEIM governing body. And that is move that the ISO Board of Governors and WEIM governing body approve the process to effectuate changes to market scheduling parameters as described in the memorandum dated March 14, 2023. And move that the ISO Board of Governors and WEIM governing body authorize management to make all necessary and appropriate filings with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission to implement the process to effectuate changes to market scheduling parameters proposed in this memorandum, including any filings that implement the overarching initiative policy but contain discrete revisions to incorporate Commission guidance in any initial ruling on the proposed tariff amendment. May I have a motion to may I have a moving party?
So move.
Thank you, Governor Borenstein. I lost my words for a moment. And a second, please.
Second, this is John.
Thank you, John. Alphabetically, Governor Borenstein,
Aye.
Member Campbell,
Aye.
Member Decker is not here. Governor Galitzeva,
Aye.
Vice Chair Gardner,
Aye.
Chair Konzioka,
Aye.
Chair Leslie,
Aye.
Member Prescott,
Aye.
and Vice Chair Shorey.
Aye.
Governing body members and board members, thank you. That motion passes. And that leads us to our last item, which is the informational reports that have been submitted. And at this point, those are informational, and unless there's any comments on, it's the Department of Market Monitoring and Policy Initiative milestone informational reports. Any comments or questions on those? Seeing none, no hands are raised, a few negative nods. And with that, we can adjourn. Thank you very much. Very
Thank you.
efficient meeting today.
Thank you.
you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you,
Bye,
Roger.
everybody.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you. Thank you, Rob.
That concludes today's conference. Thank you for using Event Services. You may now disconnect.